The table never changes. Same 4 chairs. Same crack running along the edge of the placemat my mother refuses to throw away. Same smell of pot roast and something unspoken hanging in the air between us. My brother Derek always sat across from me at these dinners, leaning back in his chair like he owned the room. Like he owned everything in it. He had that kind of smile. The kind that made you feel like you were missing a joke everyone else already understood. I noticed it the moment I walked through the door that Sunday evening. He was already there. That was unusual. Derek was never early to anything. My name is Rachel. I'm a traveling nurse. Which means for 6 months out of any given year, I'm somewhere that isn't home. I've worked contracts in Phoenix, in Baton Rouge, in a small hospital outside of Portland, where it rained every single day, and I didn't mind at all. It's the kind of work that keeps you moving, keeps you useful, keeps the noise of your own family at a comfortable distance. I loved it. I had built my life around it. Part of building that life meant buying a place to come back to. 3 years before any of this happened, I used my savings 11 years of careful, deliberate saving to purchase a 2-bedroom house in Clarksville, Tennessee, paid off in full. No mortgage. No co-signer. Mine. I had the deed in a fireproof lockbox under my bed, and I knew exactly what that paper meant. It meant no one could take it from me. It meant I had done something real. I kept the house locked when I was away on contract. A neighbor named Mrs. Aldridge watered my 2 plants on the porch and collected any packages. I paid her in homemade cookies whenever I returned. And she never asked for anything more. The house sat there, quiet and waiting. Every time I came back. That was enough. The Sunday dinner in question was in October. I had just finished a 4-month contract in Savannah and driven the 6 hours back to Clarksville the day before. I was tired in the specific way you get tired after a long assignment, not physically exhausted. Just hollowed out in places that sleep doesn't quite reach. I had planned to spend the week unpacking, restocking my kitchen, and doing absolutely nothing. My mother called that morning and asked me to come for dinner. I almost said no. I should have said no. But she used the voice she uses when she needs something to feel normal again. And I never learned how to refuse that voice. So I showered and drove over. Derek's car was in the driveway. So was my father's truck. So was the car belonging to Derek's girlfriend? Melissa, who I had met exactly 4 times and each time walked away feeling vaguely unsettled without being able to say why. Inside, my mother was at the stove. My father was at the kitchen table reading something on his phone. Derek was leaning against the counter with a glass of wine. And Melissa was sitting at the far end of the table. Very still. The way people sit when they're waiting for something to happen. There she is. Derek said. The wandering hero returns. He said it warmly. He always said things warmly. That was the thing about my brother, the warmth never felt like a lie until it was already too late. We sat down to eat. My mother had made pot roast. On the same recipe she'd been using since I was 7. My father said grace. Derek refilled his wine glass twice before the bread was passed. The conversation moved the way family dinner conversations do, slowly. Around the edges of things. Touching. Nothing real. Halfway through the meal, Derek set down his fork. He looked at me with that smile and said, Rachel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything. I remember the exact weight of those words. I remember putting down my own fork. Okay, I said. I sold your house. The room went very quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a pause in conversation, the kind of quiet that has a texture that presses against your ears. What did you say? The market was perfect. You were going to be away for months. The value had gone up almost 40% since you bought it. And I knew you'd never pull the trigger yourself. He said it the way someone explains a favor. Passion. Reasonable. I got you $375,000. Rachel. That's over $200,000 in profit. I put it somewhere safe. You should be thanking me. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her plate. I looked at my father. He cleared his throat and said, "He had good intentions." Sweetheart. Good intentions. How? I said. My voice came out very flat. Which surprised me. How did you sell my house? Derek reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. It was a printout of an email written from an account that looked like mine. Using my full name. Authorizing him as my representative for the purpose of the sale. Beneath it was a signature that was supposed to be mine. It was not my signature. I had never sent that email. I had never created that account. I had never given my brother any kind of authorization, written or verbal, to touch my property. Derek, I said, still in that flat voice. That is a forged document. It's a letter of authorization. It's a forgery. That is not my email address. That is not my signature. You sold my house using a fake document. Rachel. Listen, where is the money? He paused. Something moved across his face, not guilt. Not exactly. More like recalculation. It's in an account I set up. I was going to transfer it once whose name is the account, in another pause. Derek. I said his name like I was reading it off a form. Whose name is the account in? It's a joint account. Mine and Melissa's. For safekeeping? Melissa. At the far end of the table. Did not move. She had not looked up once. My father said, "Now, let's all just calm down." My mother finally looked up from her plate. She said, "He meant well." Rachel. He really did. The house was just sitting there empty. It was my house. I said. It was paid off, and it was mine, and I did not ask anyone to sell it. You're never there. That is not what determines whether something belongs to me. I pushed back from the table. I picked up my phone. I walked out of the kitchen and stood in the front hallway and tried to think clearly. My hands were steady, which surprised me. My mind was running very fast and very quiet at the same time. The way it does when I'm in the middle of a bad shift and I have to make a decision quickly. I did not call Derek's bluff. I did not go back in there and scream. I opened my phone and called the number for the Clarksville Police Department non-emergency line. And I told them, in as few words as possible, that I believed my property had been sold using forged documents without my consent. The officer on the line asked me to come in the following morning and bring any documentation I had. I said I would. Then I went back to the kitchen and sat down and picked up my fork. Derek was watching me. "Who did you call? No one you need to worry about tonight." I said, and I meant it. Tonight was not the night for this. Tonight I needed to eat my mother's pot roast and drive home and find my deed and make a list of every single thing I was going to do in the morning. I stayed for 30 more minutes. I helped clear the table. I kissed my mother on the cheek and told her the pot roast was good. Which it was. I did not say goodbye to Derek or Melissa. In my car, I sat in the driveway for a moment and let myself feel it, really feel it, the specific grief of being betrayed by someone who shares your blood and your childhood and your mother's cooking. It hit differently than other kinds of betrayal. It sat lower. Then I started the car and drove to my house. Except when I turned onto my street and pulled up to the curb, the lights inside were on. There was a strange car in the driveway. Through the front window, I could see furniture that was not mine. Someone was living in my house. I sat in the car for a long time. Long enough for the porch light to flicker on and illuminate a wreath on the door that I had never bought. I thought about knocking. I didn't. Whoever had purchased the house was not the person who had wronged me. And they had no idea what had been done to them either. That was a conversation for the daylight. With lawyers present, I drove to a hotel and checked in and sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. I had in the fireproof lockbox that I'd had the presence of mind to bring with me when I moved back from Savannah, the original deed to my property. I also had 11 years of bank statements showing every dollar I had used to purchase it. I had the closing documents. I had the title insurance policy. I had everything. What I did not have was time to waste. The next morning, I was at the police station at 8 o'clock. The officer I spoke with was a woman named Detective Simmons, who had short gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense attention that made me feel, for the first time in 24 hours, like I was standing on solid ground. I laid out everything on her desk. The deed, the closing papers, the printout Derek had shown me of the fake authorization email. I had photographed it with my phone at the table before I left. She looked at the email for a long time. "This account," she said, pointing at the sender address. "You're saying this isn't yours?" "My email address ends in nit," I said. "That one ends in kong." Whoever created it was counting on people not looking closely. She wrote something down. "And the signature I have, 11 documents in this folder with my actual signature, they don't match." She looked at me. "Miss Rachel," she said, "I'm going to need you to leave copies of all of this with me." I had already made 2 sets. What unfolded over the next 6 weeks was not the explosive public confrontation you might imagine. It was quieter than that, more methodical. Detective Simmons connected my case with a detective in the Financial Crimes Division named Morris, who explained that what my brother had done creating a fraudulent email account, forging my signature on an authorization document, and executing a property sale under false pretenses constituted multiple felonies under Tennessee law, including forgery, fraude, and theft of property. The title company, it turned out, had not done adequate verification. They had accepted the email authorization without confirming it against any government-issued identification or requiring a notarized power of attorney. Their legal team became very interested in this fact very quickly. The buyers, a couple in their early 40s named the Hendersons, who had relocated from Ohio for work, were contacted by the detective's office. They were devastated. They had purchased what they believed was a legitimately listed property through a licensed realtor and had already begun renovating the kitchen. They had done nothing wrong. The detective's office explained to them what had happened and what the resolution process would look like. And I made a point of speaking with them directly. Once, to tell them that I was not pursuing any action against them and that they would be made whole. Mrs. Henderson cried on the phone. She told me she was sorry this had happened to me. I told her I was sorry it had happened to her too. The money, my $375,000, had indeed been sitting in a joint account belonging to Derek and Melissa. Freezing that account was one of the first things the financial crimes detective did. Derek hired a lawyer 2 days after the account was frozen. Melissa hired a separate lawyer the day after that, which told me everything I needed to know about the architecture of their relationship. My parents called me 4 times during this period. My mother's calls were tearful and circular. She kept saying that Derek hadn't meant any harm, that families shouldn't involve the police, that I was making things worse. My father called once and said, very carefully, that he hoped I understood the consequences of what I was setting in motion. I told him I understood them perfectly. He didn't call again. I want to be honest about something. There was a part of me that considered stopping. Not because Derek deserved mercy, but because watching your mother cry is its own particular kind of pain, regardless of who caused the situation. I thought about it seriously for about 48 hours. Then I thought about 11 years of saving. I thought about what it meant to work 12-hour shifts in understaffed hospitals, to eat hospital cafeteria food for months at a time, to sleep in furnished rooms that didn't belong to me, all in service of building one thing that was unambiguously mine. I thought about Derek sitting across from me at dinner with that warm smile, telling me I should be thanking him. I stopped considering it. The preliminary hearing was in December. I sat in the courtroom and watched my brother in a suit I didn't recognize, flanked by his attorney, looking smaller than I had ever seen him look. Melissa was there too, at a separate table. They did not look at each other. The judge reviewed the documentation. She asked several pointed questions about the title company's verification process and made a note that seemed, from where I was sitting, fairly ominous for their legal team. She then looked at Derek and said, in a voice that carried the particular authority of someone who has heard every version of every excuse, "Mr. Derek, the court finds sufficient cause to proceed to trial on all counts." Derek's attorney leaned over and said something to him. Derek nodded slowly. He looked across the room at me once. I looked back. I didn't look away first. The trial itself took 3 days. The prosecution laid out the chain of evidence, methodically the fraudulent email account, created from an IP address registered to Derek and Melissa's apartment. The forged signature, analyzed by a forensic documents examiner who testified for 40 minutes about the specific inconsistencies between it and my authentic signature. Phone records showing Derek had contacted the listing agent 2 weeks before I left for Savannah. Before I even knew I'd be away for 4 months. He had been planning this. That detail, the premeditation, was what broke something open in the courtroom. Up until that moment, Derek's attorney had been building a narrative around impulsivity, around a brother who had seen an opportunity and made a poor decision in a moment of financial pressure. The phone records destroyed that narrative completely. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: forgery, wire fraud, theft of property over $250. Ling ling ling. Melissa had accepted a plea agreement 2 weeks before trial. She received 3 years of probation and was required to provide full cooperation against Derek, which she did, in extensive detail. Their relationship did not survive this process. I can't say I was surprised. Derek was sentenced to 4 years. He was also ordered to pay full restitution not just to me, but to the Hendersons, who had incurred significant costs in the process of having the fraudulent sale unwound and their purchase price returned. The title company settled separately, out of court. The terms were confidential, but my attorney told me afterward that she was satisfied with the outcome. And she had the kind of face that didn't give satisfaction away easily. My house was returned to my name 6 weeks after the conviction. The process involved more paperwork than I thought was humanly possible. But Detective Simmons had connected me with a real estate attorney early on who navigated all of it. The Hendersons moved out gracefully and left the kitchen renovation, which was genuinely beautiful. As a kind of unintentional parting gift, I stood in my driveway on the afternoon. I got the keys back and looked at the house for a long time before I went inside. It looked the same from the outside. Same paint. Same porch. Same 2 flower boxes I had installed the first summer I owned it. Inside, the kitchen smelled like fresh paint. The living room was empty. My furniture had been in storage, but the floors were the same floors I had walked across hundreds of times. And the light came through the windows at the same angle it always had. I sat down on the floor in the middle of the empty living room. I didn't cry. I had thought I might. But I didn't. What I felt was quieter than crying, more like something returning to its correct position after a long time of being displaced. The specific relief of a thing being made right. My mother has not spoken to me since the sentencing. My father called once, briefly, to tell me that Derek had asked him to pass along an apology. I told my father I had received it. I didn't say what I thought of it, because what I thought of it was complicated and my father didn't need to carry that. What I know is this: I earned that house. I earned it in Savannah and Portland and Baton Rouge, and every hospital hallway, and every overnight shift, and every modest dinner I ate alone so that my savings account could grow by another few $100s. No one gave it to me. No one was supposed to take it. And when someone did, the answer was not to absorb it quietly and keep the peace at the family dinner table? The answer was to walk out into the hallway and make the call. Justice is not loud. It doesn't announce itself over pot roast. It doesn't come with a dramatic speech or a moment where everyone in the room understands what is happening simultaneously. It comes later. In a courtroom? From a jury that deliberated for less than 4 hours. From a judge who looked at a man who had forged his sister's signature and said, "All counts." It comes when you're sitting on the floor of your empty living room. And the light is coming through the windows. And the house is yours again. That's what it feels like. Not triumph. Not vindication. Exactly. Just yours. Still yours. After everything, still yours.